RBI Governor Shaktikant Das also stressed that India's domestic economic activity continued to be resilient, while the manufacturing activity also continued to gain ground on the back of improved domestic demand.
Domestic economic activity continues to be resilient. On the supply side, steady progress in southwest monsoon, higher cumulative kharif sowing, and improving reservoir levels augur very well for the kharif output. Manufacturing activity continues to gain ground on the back of improving domestic demand.
And we are now joined by senior economic journalist Anil Padmanabhan on the show for more perspective on RBI's Monetary Policy Committee decisions. So would you say that RBI's status quo on the repo rate is very much as expected?
Yes, Tanvi, more or less everybody had expected the Reserve Bank of India to hold the rates this time, and particularly because of the concerns on food inflation. Core inflation, as you know, has decelerated pretty steeply, but food inflation continues to be a cause of concern, and the governor particularly flagged the fact that inflation is a threat, but food inflation is a threat, and that unless and until it settles, he is hopeful that it will decelerate in the next few months. But as of now, they continue to be watchful on the inflation front.
Okay. Now, the RBI policy decision was taken with a majority of 4:2 by the Monetary Policy Committee. Why do you think there was some difference in perception regarding a possible rate cut?
See, Tanvi, this has been happening over the last two meetings, that two members have have rather argued that the Reserve Bank of India is delaying the rate cuts and it could impact growth. So their argument is that these impacts, when you do a rate cut, it's not immediate, the impact, it's a lagged impact, and they might get the sequencing wrong. So they continue to voice that concern, and that's what we are seeing, that two of these members are continuing to argue for a rate cut at this point of time.
So under what conditions can we expect a policy rate cut by the RBI?
The governor was very, very clear on this. He said that all things are, macroeconomic circumstances are very good for India at this point of time. And when you compare it to the rest of the world, it is excellent. The only concern he flagged was inflation. And the Reserve Bank of India's task has been eased a little because growth has continued to be resilient despite the fact that the RBI has held rates for so long. So unless and until food inflation eases, there are indications that it could, because one, the southwest monsoon has been reasonably good. The kharif sowing has been better than last year. Globally, food inflation has decelerated pretty recently, and all of this point to the fact that food inflation could decelerate. Unless and until food inflation decelerates, the Reserve Bank of India is signaling that it will continue to be hawkish on the rate cut issue.
Okay, Anilji, the RBI has retained its fiscal year 2024-25 GDP growth projection at 7.2%. Would you agree that this projected 7.2% GDP growth rate is extremely satisfactory, especially considering the low growth in major global economies?
See, Tanvi, the RBI has to give it credit where it's due. They have been pretty conservative in their growth estimates. So even last year they were pretty conservative. Only towards the end of the fiscal year they upped their projections for last year, which eventually turned out to be 8%, and they were among the first people to signal that the growth rate was going to be higher than what was expected. So if they are projecting 7.2%, it is on the conservative side. So you should look at this as a conservative projection of growth. Yes, it is too early in the year to suggest any certainty on these numbers, given the vagaries in the rest of the world, which you have flagged just now. So yes, looking ahead, this growth rate looks reasonable at this point of time.
And lastly, sir, your view on the reaction of the stock market to the unchanged repo rate?
The stock markets did not really react adversely. They did go down briefly, but they are back up. Remember, the same stock markets rode the June 4th election verdict, and in fact, they've recorded highs after that, lifetime highs subsequently. So the Indian stock markets are stable at this point of time, but there are a lot of factors in play, so we have to wait and watch. But they have not reacted adversely to the Reserve Bank of India decision to hold the rates.
Okay. Anil Padmanabhanji, thank you very much for your analysis.